What percentage of people in Colorado do you think attend church at least once a month? It's about 15%. If you don't count the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't count that. So 15%. Once a month. I saw this number yesterday as I was preparing some of the sermon stuff, and it just hit me. Like, we want to see change in the state. We talk about like changing abortion laws and changing this in politics and changing stuff in the schools and everything else. How are we going to do that when only 15% of the people even go to church once a month? Not every week, like once a month. Jesus is and always will be the only Savior, and he's the solution to all of our problems. He's the solution to our societal problems. You know how our society is really going to change? When revival comes. And there's different ways that we can talk about revival and how we define revival. But how I define revival is this: mass salvation accompanied by societal transformation. If you have a different name for mass salvation accompanied by societal transformation, tell me and I'll use that word, because revival gets used like personal revival and different things, and I'm okay, like you can use it however you want. But when I'm talking about revival, that is what I'm talking about. That salvation is going to come in mass to Denver and to Colorado, to the United States, around the world, in this place where only 15% of people even bother to go to church once a month is going to be transformed, because the power of God and the presence of God is with us. Because at the end of the day, I believe with everything inside of me that the presence of God dwelling in our midst is how it's supposed to be on the everyday basis and for the norm. It's not supposed to be like this just happens one time in history and you have it for a couple years if you're lucky, and then you move on, or you got to go travel to some place. God wants his presence in the midst of us. But at the end of the day, what's happening is that the model that we have for church is broken. And I include like us, like we're like 1% of where I want to be as a church. Jesus told us to make disciples of the nations and to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, to teach them everything that he obeyed. And we're not actually making disciples. We don't know how to do this hands-on discipleship thing. And so 97% of church growth in America is through transfer growth. Every single one of us transferred here. Some people, like you might have given your life to Jesus and like you're part of the church now, but like most of us, like we transfer into a church. There's nothing wrong with that. But when the whole goal is transfer growth in order to accumulate numbers of people, bigger buildings, and the amount of money that the church builds in, it is a broken system right at the very heart. Jesus called us to make disciples. His church is supposed to make disciples, hands-on. Again, like I said this not too long ago. Jesus, in as far as we can see in the Gospels, he never taught a Bible study. He spoke truth. He showed them how to do it. He spoke truth. He showed them how to go deeper in that relationship. Now, we don't live in the culture. In Jesus' culture, they had a firm understanding of the Old Testament because it was cultural for them. So there is a need for that. But the other side of it, we've missed and we haven't laid a hold of. But at the end of the day, if we want to see this revival, if we want to see the outpouring of God, if we want to see society transformed, something has to give and something has to change. Because the model that we have right now is much more that we stay in and we go after the 99 and leave the one. But the problem is that it's not just one. Those numbers of lost people are increasing, actually. In the state of Colorado, it's not just that 15% of the people go to church at least once a month. But 10 years ago, 64% of Coloradans said that they were Christian. 10 years later today, it's 52%. If we lose more than 1% a year, we're not going to last very long. And I believe at the heart of it is this. It's not God's fault. He's already told us what to do. It's not the world's fault. Why would it be the world's fault? But we have to get and we have to understand God's heart. And as we understand and we get God's heart and stop trying to move his to somewhere else, but get his, then we're going to see the things that he's promised, and we're going to see the changes that we want to see. We have this We have this, the ministry that helps us out with some of like our Google stuff and everything. And I hear like all the time on there, they're like this guy's slogan, like, we're going to make heaven more crowded. What about making earth more crowded with disciples? It's not just one or the other. See, what's happening? We have a problem within the church, and it's like we put this mask over our eyes, pretending like everything is going great and like everything is going good. And we take anecdotal stories of like this church is seeing this amazing thing here, or this country is seeing this amazing thing here. And it's not always true. And what it does, it puts a mask over our eyes, gives us those rose-colored glasses that we're seeing the world in a way that doesn't match reality because we want it to be true so bad. Hopefully that makes sense. God's already told us how to do this, and it's through discipleship. Part of the problem is we don't really know how to do it hands-on. And I don't know if since the first generation, or maybe with pockets like throughout history, that the church has ever really got it. At the heart of this discipleship is how we walk with God and the relationship that we have with God. Each and every person out there, for each one of us, you were created in God's image. God created in Genesis 1, and then in 1 verses 26 to 28, it says that God created male and female, men and women in his image, male and female, he created us. You were made in his image, and this is why when a man and woman come together in marriage, with the differences that they had, we more fully reflect the image of God. And when we come together as a church body, with the different gifts and passions and desires and everything else, what we're good at, then we're able to more fully reflect the image of God in that way as well. But you were created in the image of God, and that their neighbor, that person that just cut you off in the car, they were created in the image of God. And we can see from Genesis 3, verse 15, from the very beginning, God has always had a plan. And this plan is for all people groups all over the entire earth, that God would be glorified, that as we come together as a body, we more fully reflect the image of God. And as all the different peoples around the earth and different people groups around the earth come together to reflect God's image as a body, we more fully reflect the image of God that way. So be fruitful and multiply and cover the face of the earth. But in Genesis 3:15, from the very beginning, we see that God had a plan. Sin entered, and the brokenness, with sin entered the brokenness into the world. And God said to the serpent, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. And although it doesn't say Jesus here, we can see that offspring, God's offspring, being Jesus, would crush the head of the enemy. Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil, and he has made a way on that cross that we can walk this out with him. And right from the beginning, that was God's plan. If we skip ahead to Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3, God made a promise to Abraham. It says this, the Lord has said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples or all people groups on the earth will be blessed through you. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what it is. God's purpose and God's plan is for each and every people group. And to be honest, I was thinking about this, and I was dialoguing with some people about this a little bit yesterday. I feel like as a church, capital C church, we've lost some of the urgency of bringing the gospel to the world that we used to have 20 or 30 years ago. 20 or 30, it might just be me, it might just be the circles that I'm in, but I feel like we've lost a lot of the urgency. Like there's this window, there's this unreached people group, there's 10,000 people groups in Papua New Guinea, and 8,000 of them still haven't been reached. And we've lost the urgency in this that we once had. And I think part of it is because we pulled wool over our eyes and we don't actually see it. And this is what happens, like this kind of stuff happens, and it happens pretty regularly. In Iran, I've heard this for years, like there's revival in Iran, and there's all these amazing things happening in Iran, and they're closing down mosques and everything else. Do you know why they're closing the mosques in Iran? They are having to shut down mosques in Iran. Because half of the population has left Islam and gone to be a religious nun or an atheist. 0.5 to 1.5% of the Iranian church, of the Iranian people are now Christian. That's not the revival that I've been hearing about. But what it does is it gives us a false sense of reality of what's happening there, so we don't feel like we need to go there. And on the other side of it, like people are working, they're trying to raise funds, they're trying to survive as a people, and so they're telling these stories. And because we have all this stuff at our fingertips, you can watch it on YouTube and you can watch videos here and there and everywhere else. You see this stuff get posted on social media. So we think all this amazing stuff is happening, and there are pockets of amazing things happening, but only 1% of the population is Christian in that country. In China, you hear like the house churches are just exploding and they're on fire. The church in China has been stagnant for 20 years. Look it up. Like, look it up for yourself. It's still at 2%. At the year 2000, it was 2%. Now it's 2%. I hear people say this all the time. We need to be like the church in China, like under persecution, and they have to do real discipleship. But they've been stagnant for 20 years. There was a boom leading up to 2000, but for the last 20, 25 years, it's been stagnant. In India, 2.3% of the population are Christian. I think it's 100 million Dalits, the untouchables. You're only allowed to touch them as they work as temple prostitutes. Like real people, 100 million real people that aren't even allowed to be touched. That the only jobs that they can get is cleaning up people's and animals' feces on the streets or working in the sewers and stuff like that. It's absolutely horrible. And there's 100 million people and they live in this world. And they're still, generally speaking, they're still unreached. Such small percentages. And to a degree, I think that we've lost the urgency that we had. And we can see it here in Colorado. In Colorado, we've gone from 64% Christian to 52% in 10 years. We can't blame the world. Can't blame it all on the devil. Something's got to give. And I believe at the heart of this is that as we understand God's heart for the lost, and we learn how to disciple people in this, in that place of abiding, that we can truly get God's heart and we can walk other people through this process. Like, this is how you have encounters with God. This is how you actually draw closer to God. And as we do that, things are going to start to shift and they're going to change. But as long as we're focused on numbers in the church, and like honestly, like my numbers go around and I'm seeing how many people are here last night and today and everything. It's just so culturally ingrained in me and I want to break it. And I have to break it because at the end of the day, what's important is that I'm doing what God has called me to do, that I'm being obedient, and that I'm making disciples like he called us to. And that's for each and every one of us. But it starts with this abiding. In John 15:4, it says this. Jesus said, "Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." Like this ability or this understanding of how we remain in God is at the very heart and the very center of how we walk out our Christian faith. But the reality is no one ever showed me how to do it. No one ever showed me how to worship. Like, I realized this. I was at the worship thing at Layla's school this week, and I'm clapping. I was so out of, like, my clapping even was so like out of whatever, like cadence or whatever. And I'm like, what is happening? Because in the beginning, I remember like 25 years ago when I was going to church, I had to try really hard to clap in time. And it was the first time in like 20 years that I couldn't do it. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm so musically like inept. It's true. But no, that's good. Like, but that was like I'm trying to learn how to clap in time. Like that was the extent of me learning how to worship. No one took me aside and said, "Hey, let's worship together and let me give you some feedback on this and let's talk about this and let's see where this lies in Scripture and then let's do it again and let's build off of this and let's learn how to invite the presence of God in and build momentum as you're praying and yielding to God, speaking in tongues, prophesying, and then getting out and seeing the sick healed and the dead raised." No one ever showed me how to do that. But I am telling you right now, that is what we have to do. And not because I think it's a good idea, but because Scripture is very clear that that's what we need to do. We oftentimes jump ahead to ministry before we actually get to the part of abiding or remaining. See, as we do this and as we start to have these experiences with God, we go through this, like we go through, it's a growth process. And we can accelerate that growth process. Like it took me like 20 something years to even get to that place where I understood, I need to really develop and cultivate this relationship with God. And these are some ways that I can do it. It took me 20 something years to get to that part. But throughout that time, what was happening is your focus is on different things as you learn and as you grow, or as I learn and as I grow. In the very beginning, when I became a Christian, I realized this, and I told this story about this young kid, 18 years old, that was at Columbine a couple years ago, and it was the same thing. That I said, you know what, if this is actually true, then it means everything. If it's not true, it means nothing. But if it's true, it means everything. That's what that kid at Columbine told me. I said, would you want to know that God's real? And he said, oh yeah, with everything. It would be the most important thing in the entire world. And that's the truth of it. That if we're talking about people's eternal destinies, if we're talking about the purpose for which we were actually put here on the earth, there's nothing that's more important than that. And I realized that early on, and so I just did the best that I could, like serving evangelism, like Steve Sjogren's vineyard stuff was a thing back then. So I get out on the street and we do free car washes and I give out sodas to people, and we went to the Holly Weird concert to go see Cinderella and Poison perform in San Diego, and it was just, it was so awesome. Like, you guys are holier than me, you don't know who those bands are. But we went there to do outreach and like to engage with the people, and like they shut us down because it was the Pepsi Center in San Diego, and we were giving out Pepsi and Mountain Dew and stuff. Like, but it was just part of it. But it was serving. It was getting out there and serving. That's what I knew how to do because no one showed me the other part. And you just do the best job that you can. But then as I went and I started to get it more, it became much more programmatic. And so I'm running programs and we're helping kids in the Philippines. We're taking kids off the street. And it was good. And like there was good stuff coming out of it, and there was fruit coming out of it. So I must have been abiding in some way. But this is all part of the process. And I didn't get the other part of actually spending that time and cultivating that time with God. Like in Heidi Baker's book, I think it's Birthing the Miraculous, she tells this story, like everything was falling apart and everything was a disaster in her ministry in Mozambique. And like it was like verge of crisis. They were entering into this crisis mode. And she said, I'll be back in a few hours. I'm going out snorkeling. And they were like, no, you can't leave. There's all these problems going on. She said, I'll be back. And so she went out for like 4 or 5 hours. She snorkeled and just spent time with God. That's what I want in my life. And I started to get it. And when I go on these trips to the Philippines, like, and I start to like, you get attacked, or you start to like wander down the path like of thinking like that you're going to do things your own way, whatever it is. Like just getting back to that place. Nope, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend an hour. I'm going to spend a couple hours with God right now. And that's that place of abiding. And then out of the abiding flows the ministry. And through the ministry, it draws us deeper into God and brings us back to the abiding. And it's a cycle, but we either usually get one side or the other. We're so focused on spending time with God that we don't go out and do it, that we miss that other side, or we're so focused on going out and do it and serving and social justice and everything else that we miss the abiding part, which is where I was, but they both go together. And this is why Jesus said that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, but the second one is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself, because they actually go together. When you get out there and you see the brokenness, I'm in San Diego at an evangelical school, evangelical university, and I look around, 2,000 people, and there's like 5 people actually worshiping in this place. You know, like all like goodness of God and like Amazing Grace, the song. People don't even know the words of those songs, and I'm like, what are we doing? And then I go off to Vegas, and Vegas is fine during the day, but Tammy decided to take me out on a walk in Vegas at midnight, and it's a little bit crazy out there. Every 5 feet, what? I only blame when it's true. So, but every 5 steps is another like thing of marijuana coming around, and the way people are dressed and everything else. Like it's hard and it's challenging, but you start to get God's heart because that person is an actual person created in God's image that He loves. David Parker, he was a vineyard pastor in Southern California for a long time. Had a church of 1,200 people. And in one of the services one time, this woman started coming in. She was a stripper. She'd bring her 2 little kids into children's church. And then she was coming into church as a stripper, and she was basically dressed as a stripper. And honestly, that would make me uncomfortable. Some of those people that I saw in Vegas, if they were dressed that way coming into church, it would make me uncomfortable. And a woman came up to him with her 2 teenage boys one time. And she said, Pastor, please, tears in her eyes, please, for the sake of my teenage boys, please tell her to put some clothes on. And he looked at her with compassion in his eyes and in his heart. And he said, the second I do that, we're never going to see her or those little kids again. She'd be a stripper, or a porn star, or a communist dictator, it doesn't matter. Child of God created in his image that he loves. And if you can't go to church to get cleaned up, where are you going to go? You got to get cleaned up to go into church? So he didn't say anything to this woman. A couple months later, she's still dressing that way. And she came up to him after a service. He said, Pastor, I don't know what to do. I think I probably need to change jobs. And he said, yeah, probably. She said, I don't know what to do though. Like I get these kids, I'm a single mom, and all I can do is get a minimum wage job, and I can't pay the bills with the minimum wage job. And he said, it's okay. A few months later, there was a family with a small business in the church that needed an administrator. They hired her as administrator. She started coming to church dressed appropriately. And those kids got to get raised up in a loving environment. And that's the heart of God on display. I don't blame that woman. I don't blame that woman for struggling like with the stuff that her kids were seeing. I don't blame her at all for that. But he loves each and every one. He loves us more than we could ever know. So he's called us to be his hands and feet and to draw close to him. See, early on when I was walking the vineyard, and I kind of get this with the vineyard, they had a saying like being precedes doing. Like out of the being precedes what you do. And I think they actually missed it a little bit. Because it's not just that the doing comes out of the being, but the doing also feeds back into the being. That you are what you do as well. You do from who you are, but from the doing that also feeds back into who you are. And it's this cycle, this is the abiding process. That we spend the time with God and we engage with God, but then as we get out into the world and we see the brokenness and we see what's happening even with the people in our midst, the people that are struggling like physically, the people that are struggling with their mental health, that we see that and we get God's heart and we stop trying to move his heart to something else because he's already the God of the universe. He doesn't need to be moved. And we start to get his heart. And as we start to get his heart, we start to do the things that Jesus did as we're his hands and we're his feet. And it's just whatever he puts in front of you. This young guy messaged me on Facebook asking for prayer yesterday, struggling with alcohol. I could tell him all the things that he's doing wrong. I could tell him that he needs to get his life straight and everything else. The reality is I don't need to. He already knows. That's why he's asking for prayer. And he said in the conversation that I had with him, he said, well, I need to get sober first. Like, I need to get sober, and then I got to get back to church. And I said, I think you got things backwards. In 1999, I was a drunken Marine. I was. I gave my life to Jesus in February, and for the next 2 years, I drank as much as I ever did in my entire life. I would come to church each time on Sunday morning, either hungover or still drunk from the night before. I was a mess. They had grace for me. This one guy's name's Winston. He's a pastor of Vineyard Church in Tucson now. That guy had such grace for me. They didn't judge me. They welcomed me back in. They ministered to the drunken Jack week after week during ministry time. God loved me. And he loves you. And he loves your neighbor. And I believe as we really get this and we can disciple people in this and we walk this out, not that we're pointing out other people's sin. Like if you're in a discipleship relationship with someone, yeah, then that's appropriate. Like you should help them and you walk them through it. And you have an understanding and agreement in that. But we don't need to be pointing out each other's sin all the time. We don't need to be telling people what they're doing wrong all the time. Imagine being a pastor of a church of 100 people or 1,000 people or whatever it is, and everyone feels like they need to tell you what you're doing wrong all the time. Oof. It's no different like if you're not pastoring the church. It's hard. We need to love one another. Jesus said later on here in John 15, in verses 12 to 15, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You're my friends if you do what I command. And I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. It's interesting here. He says to love each other, and he says to lay down your life for each other. And then he says, if you do what I've commanded you to love each other and lay down your life for each other, then you're my friend. He doesn't just say, pray a prayer one time and then you're my friend. If you do what I've commanded you to do, to love each other, to glorify my Father, then you're a friend of God. And there's an invitation for each and every one of us. He's raising up this nameless, faceless generation. And he is going to raise up a people that truly understands discipleship. I believe it. And it's an opportunity for us.